Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our briefing on the City of Philadelphia's response to gun violence. This briefing is for press only. If you're not a member of the press, please log out and watch on today's live stream on the City of Philadelphia's Facebook page, or you can tune in on 900 AM or 96.1 FM WURD. We'll begin our briefing with remarks by Mayor Jim Kenney. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thanks, Dina. Good afternoon, everybody. Excuse me. Today, we're going to start with a topic that is not specifically related to violence prevention, but it does have a big impact on how the police department keeps our community safe. Our administration and city council are working together, my apologies. Our administration and city council are working together to expand accountability. Sorry, it's my allergies. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. Our administration and city council are working together to expand accountability and transparency of the department and its officers with the implementation of the new Citizens Police Oversight Commission. As you may already know, the new Citizens Police Oversight Commission was empowered to provide significant civilian oversight on June 10th, 2021. CPOC will work to improve police conduct, enhance the quality of internal investigations, and increase communications and engagement between the community and the department. This new commission will not only increase police accountability, but will also bolster the relationship with the department and the public it serves. Both of these things are critical to improving public safety and creating a stronger, safer city for us all. The city is beginning to work to identify commissioners to support the work of CPOC. 9 commissioners will be appointed by a selection panel for 2 or 4-year terms. Our administration and city council have identified a slate of civic and community leaders to shepherd the selection process for commissioners. These panel members include Pastor Carl Day, Culture Changing Christians Worship Center, and the president and founder of the outreach nonprofit Culture Changing Christians. Vanessa Garrett Harley, the first deputy managing director at the City of Philadelphia and former deputy managing director for criminal justice and public safety. Angelica Hendricks Esquire, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law Center and former senior policy analyst for the Police Advisory Commission. Pastor Mark Tyler, pastor at Mother Bethel AME Church and co-director of Power and Live Free campaign. Samantha J. Williams Esquire, the director of legislation and policy for Councilmember Curtis Jones Jr. and a former assistant attorney for Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. I thank these individuals for taking on this important work. The selection panel will meet next week to develop the application and finalize the selection process. Before the end of the month, we'll release an application that will be open to Philadelphia residents to serve on the Citizens Police Oversight Commission. Serving on the CPOC is a terrific opportunity to give back to our city. And I urge all Philadelphians interested in applying to serve on the commission to look out for the application before the end of the month, which will be posted on our website, phila.gov. Councilmember Curtis Jones Jr., who is leading this work on behalf of City Council, joins us today to explain more about CPOC and its vision. Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your team's participation that has gotten us to this point today. I feel like it's a final lap in a 4-lap relay. It started in '93 with the executive orders from then Mayor Rendell, and has continued on to yourself, who has now made it a part of an independent commission to oversee the complaint process that sometimes is submitted by citizens of Philadelphia. In this 4th leg, the second part was getting adequate funding. And now we have a selection panel that is diverse, representing former DAs and former defense attorneys, as well as members of the clergy. So I'm excited about watching this selection process unfold. What is important is that this commission be viewed as fair to all citizens of Philadelphia, and that the process is understandable and transparent. And finally, that we give it the proper resources so it can actually perform its duties. For far too long, it's been underfunded. For far too long, it's not been totally trusted by the citizens of Philadelphia. And finally, it has taken too long. Those complaints sometimes lasted 2 years to come to no conclusion at all. I want to commend you and your team for working it out with the FOP and coming up with a contract that is fair to those public servants. And now this is another shoe that will fall that makes it fair to the citizens of Philadelphia, and as they feel safe and included, even when they have complaints against Philadelphia police officers. So thank you.
Great. Now we'll turn it over to Commissioner Outlaw.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Councilmember Jones. The city's crime numbers over the last year highlights the continued need for officer presence throughout the city. Just this past Monday night, shortly after 7 p.m. in the 1100 block of Lehigh, 2 15-year-olds were found shot, one of them multiple times in the head and legs, and the other once in the backside. One of these children has unfortunately passed away, while the other is expected to recover. These are kids with their entire lives in front of them, and those lives and the lives of those around them are now forever impacted because of the scourge of gun violence that we've been seeing. No parent or loved one should have to go through the agonizing pain of burying their child, and our children should not be experiencing continued and sustained trauma in the way that they have been. These are events that impact victims' daily lives and follow them for years. From a collective standpoint, senseless acts of violence such as this have an impact on our entire city. And we know that gun violence is often a symptom of a much larger problem. Where we find gun violence, we also find other troubling activities such as group violence, narcotics use, and sales, and urban decay. Thankfully, the PPD has received assistance from numerous city stakeholders and our state and federal partners. And because of these partnerships, we've seen our violent crime numbers go down. We've also been able to impact narcotic sales and incidents of group violence because of these coordinated efforts. We are thankful for these partnerships with our local, state, and federal agencies. While these are steps in the right direction, we will remain cautiously optimistic. As Deputy Commissioner Joe Dales, who's our Deputy Commissioner of Patrol, will speak about shortly, over the last several weeks, we've begun to see a downward trend in our homicide and shooting stats. While these statistics are encouraging, we cannot allow ourselves to take our foot off the gas. We will continue to drive forward our efforts in combating violent crime throughout the city. While we continue to work on proactive violence reduction strategies, the PPD also continues to work cases from the back end. Police operations often extend beyond the work of police officers. While sometimes unrecognized for their contributions to policing, our forensic investigators and technicians play a very significant role in analyzing evidence and solving cases in our city. Next week is the start of National Forensic Science Week. National Forensic Science Week was started in 2013, and Philadelphia was the first city to recognize it. It's an opportunity to recognize the forensic science professionals around the country who use objective science to exonerate the innocent, reveal investigative leads, and to identify subjects to solve and prevent crime. I'd also like to take this time to thank and acknowledge the hard work of our forensics teams in the PPD ahead of next week's National Forensics Week. Again, thank you for all that you do and for all of your hard work, and not only helping police officers solve cases, but bringing closure and justice to victims and their families. As Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, our Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, will be discussing shortly, thanks to continued improvements in forensic capabilities, forensic work plays a critical role in solving crimes here in our city. And as he will highlight in a few minutes, thanks to forensics, we were able to solve a case from 2007. But before I turn this over to Deputy Dales, I want to mention that today is the start of Hispanic Heritage Month. As you all know, the city of Philadelphia celebrates Hispanic Heritage Month in big ways. Although the pandemic has caused the city to postpone one of the best known celebrations of Puerto Rican culture in the city, the Puerto Rican Day Parade, There are still many ways for us to come together to celebrate Hispanic culture in our city. Individuals from Latino and Hispanic backgrounds have been a part of the very fabric of the United States since the birth of our nation. And I want to thank our Hispanic officers who not only contribute their cultural perspectives to our department, but also act as liaisons to the Hispanic community. Their work here in the PPD is invaluable, and I'm thankful for their continued dedication to our communities. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate in advance Captain Javier Rodriguez of the 25th District, who has spent over 25 years serving the citizens of Philadelphia. He was just recently notified that he will be receiving Concilio's Citizen of the Year Award for his tireless work in the community. Again, great work to you. Hats off, Captain Rodriguez. Finally, I would like to remind and encourage anyone who is interested in applying for the position of Police Communications Dispatcher to go to the City of Philadelphia's hiring website at www.phila.peopleadmin.com to learn more and to apply. The closing date for the application is this upcoming Friday, September 17th, and police dispatchers are the first of the first. So I want us to remember this. They are the first of the first responders, and they play an instrumental role in keeping us all safe. So please encourage anyone that you may know that may be interested or someone that they may know that's interested to apply. Thank you. DC Dales.
Thank you, Commissioner. Waiting for my slides. Okay. All right. I will start with the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats. Looking at the top of the chart, year to date as of September 12th of this year, Philadelphia had 1,612 shooting victims. And out of the 1,612, 372 were homicides. In comparison to last year, homicides are up 17%, 372 this year versus 319 last year. And shooting victims are up 11%, 1,612 this year versus 1,454 last year. Looking at the bottom left of the chart, it shows the same motives, again, for the homicides: arguments, drugs, and domestic. Next slide, please. All right, this slide shows the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats weekly comparison. From September 6th to September 12th, we had 11 homicides, 46 shooting victims, which include homicides and multiple shooting victims. Within this period, the multiple shooting victims, we had 1 triple and 5 doubles this week. And we also had 39 shooting occurrences. When I mention shooting occurrences, I'm talking about the actual incident, not the number of victims. Next slide, please. This slide shows the comparison between citywide homicides and homicides that occurred in the pinpoint grid. If you look at the top chart, it shows citywide homicides up 17%. And looking at the bottom chart, it shows homicides in the pinpoint grids down 1%. Next slide, please. This slide shows the comparison between citywide shooting victims and shooting victims in the pinpoint grids. Citywide shooting victims are up 11%, and the pinpoint grids are down 15%. Next slide. Looking at the top of the chart, it shows citywide homicides up 6% and citywide shooting victims down 11% when comparing the current 4-week period, which is August 16th to September 12th, with the previous 4-week period, which is from July 19th to August 15th. Looking at the bottom of the chart, it shows homicides down 25% and shooting victims down 43% in the pinpoint grids when comparing the current 4-week period with the previous 4-week period. Next slide, please. This slide shows the year-end total VOOF arrests for 2017 through 2020 and the total VOOF arrest year-to-date for 2021 from January 1st to September 13th. VOOF arrest is an acronym for violation of the Uniform Firearms Act. So when I mention VOOF arrest, it basically means the person was arrested for illegally possessing a firearm. In 2020, we reached an all-time high for VOOF arrests. I know I say this every time we meet, but I like to stress that we reached an all-time high of 2,324. And so far this year, we have made 1,874 VOOF arrests. And I would like to point out that this time last year, we had 1,295 VOOF arrests, which is a 45% increase when compared to the year-to-date total. Next slide, please. All right, this slide here shows the crime guns that we recovered this year. If you look at the far right, it shows 4,245 crime guns were recovered. Last year, we reached 4,989. If we continue at this pace, we will reach, with no doubt, 6,029. Next slide, please. This slide here shows the ghost guns, which are properly made firearms. We reached 397 so far in 2021. Last year, by the end of last year, we reached 250. So as you can see, that's a significant difference this year in comparison to last year and also in 2019. So with that, I will pass it over to Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who will highlight some of the cases he wishes to speak about.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Dales. Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I'm going to provide updates on a number of older homicide investigations, including one that, as the Commissioner mentioned, is more than a decade old. It's important to recognize that some homicide investigations can take a significant amount of time to develop the necessary evidence to hold an offender responsible for the crime. But the dedicated men and women of the homicide unit continue to work the older cases in pursuit of justice. I would also like to provide updates on a couple of recent cases from the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021 that we've been able to make significant progress in solving. The first case I'm going to be talking about is an individual that is up on the screen. And this is a great example of how DNA evidence can impact a case. On November the 7th, 2007, at 400 West Spencer Street, the officers from the 35th responded to a radio call for a person with a gun. And upon arrival, the officers located a victim shot in the back. Detectives learned that 3 black males wearing masks entered the store. And during the commission of a robbery, they shot and killed the victim who tried to intervene. DNA evidence was recovered from a mask that was left at the crime scene, and it was submitted into the FBI DNA database, which is otherwise referred to as CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System. Despite investigative efforts, there were no new leads developed, and the case ultimately went cold. However, on December the 24th of 2020, just last year, the end of the year, the Office of Forensic Science received a CODIS comparison result consistent with the DNA profile of the individual you see on the screen, Ryan Keel. Mr. Keel is in federal custody concerning an open FBI case against him. And on May 4th of 2021, a recent DNA sample from Ryan Keel was compared against the DNA from the mask that was recovered at the scene, and it resulted in a match. Based on the DNA match, along with additional evidence, on July 21st of this year, an arrest warrant was obtained for Ryan Keel, charging him with murder, conspiracy, violation of the Uniform Firearms Act, robbery, and related offenses. And on August the 12th of this year, Ryan Keel was formally charged with the November 7th, 2007 murder of Carlos Diaz Cato. It was with DNA evidence that detectives were able to identify one of the suspects in this 2007 cold case almost 14 years later and provide some closure to the family of the victim. For my second highlight, I'm going to call attention to the last homicide of this last year, 2020. On December 31st of 2020, at 1:06 p.m., 35th District officers responded to a radio call for a person with a gun on the highway at 1926 68th Avenue. And upon arrival of the officers, they located the victim, Diane Smith, a 16-year-old male who was in the rear of the property suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. Information was obtained from an officer who was familiar with the ongoing violence between 2 groups of juveniles and young adults in the area where the homicide occurred. And that information led to the identification of the individual you see on the screen, Rakir Smith, as a suspect. Detectives worked diligently to piece together social media messages and additional evidence that show Rakir Smith committed this murder along with 2 other still unidentified males. And on August 30th of this year, detectives obtained an arrest warrant for Rakir Smith, charging with murder, conspiracy, violation of the Uniform Firearms Act and related offenses. And then on September the 3rd at 6 o'clock, officers were responding to a report of a robbery on the 200 block of South 21st Street. There were 3 black males. They were all armed with guns, and they had robbed a grocery store and fled on foot. 2 plainclothes officers responded to the area and observed 3 males walking on the 600 block of South 24th Street. The officers coordinated an approach, and after a brief pursuit, officers apprehended the males and positively identified them as the males who robbed the store. One of these males from that incident was Rakir Smith, who was in possession of a loaded 9mm handgun. Excellent police work by our officers resulted in the apprehension of these violent offenders. Rakir Smith already had 2 active warrants at the time of his arrest. One was for the aforementioned murder and the other was for a burglary. Mr. Smith is also a suspect in multiple commercial robbery incidents in the area and throughout the city. If anyone has any additional information about the homicide that had occurred on the last day of 2020, or any information regarding any of the other suspects, we ask that they would please contact the homicide unit 686-3334 or our tip line 686-TIPS. The next update is in reference to the arrest of a fugitive from one of our first homicides of 2021, which is another example of how beneficial DNA evidence and crucial DNA evidence can be if we get it and it exists. On the screen is a picture of Jacob McMahon. And on January the 1st at 3:50 a.m., police responded to the 3900 block of North Fairhill Street to a residence on that location. They were met by the daughter and son-in-law of a victim, Mauricio Germudo, an 83-year-old man. The individuals that were at the residence told police they had last seen the victim at 10 o'clock at night when they left the residence for a New Year's celebration. Upon returning at 3 o'clock in the morning, the witnesses found the victim tied and gagged with duct tape and zip ties, and he was severely beaten. They reported that missing from the residence was a safe that contained a large amount of cash. The victim was taken to the hospital in critical condition, and sadly, on January the 18th of this year, the 83-year-old victim succumbed to his injuries. There were several items that were recovered from the crime scene, and they were submitted to our criminalistics lab for analysis. And on April the 15th, our criminalistics lab noted that it detected DNA belonging to the decedent and DNA from 2 other individuals that was located on evidence that was left at the scene. These profiles were placed into the CODIS system for comparison. And on June 30th, a preliminary match was obtained from the CODIS system on one of the unidentified DNA samples attributed to Jacob McMahon. As a result of the dedicated work by our detectives, an arrest warrant was eventually obtained on August the 30th for Jacob McMahon for this brutal murder. And on August 31st, McMahon was arrested in Pinellas, Florida. He's currently awaiting extradition to Philadelphia, where he will face charges of murder, robbery, and related offenses. And again, if anyone has information on this incident, because there's still one outstanding suspect, please call our tip line at 686-TIPS. Now, the fourth and final case I want to highlight is captures one of our city's most wanted fugitives by the United States Marshal Service. Now, we have a video, and what you see on the beginning of the video is Carlos Morales. And in this incident on October the 4th of 2020, at 10:10 a.m., police responded to a radio call for a person with a gun at 1900 Cornwall Street. Upon arrival, they discovered the victim lying. And there you see our offender firing multiple shots at our victim. In fact, the video surveillance showed the offender hiding behind a parked vehicle and ambushing the victim in broad daylight. There was the actual crime scene was 4 blocks long, and the offender chased after the victim, as you saw in that video, and shot him multiple times. The detectives worked nonstop to obtain and assemble video surveillance that enabled them to ultimately identify the offender as Carlos Morales. And on October the 9th of 2020, an arrest warrant was obtained for Mr. Morales, charging him with murder, violation of the Uniform Firearms Act, and related offenses. And it was 11 months later, on September the 10th, just last week, that members of the United States Marshal Service Fugitive Task Force arrested Mr. Morales in Albany, New York. Carlos Morales, at that time, attempted to flee from members of the task force by pushing an open air conditioner out of a second floor window and he jumped into the courtyard and fled. The task force members took him into custody. They seized 125 grams of fentanyl and 73 grams of crack cocaine from the residence. And the police jurisdiction in Albany is still investigating the narcotic seizure. This apprehension would not have been possible without our dedicated homicide detectives and the diligent work by the United States Marshals Task Force. And with that, and 2 of these incidents show how critically important forensic evidence is. I'm going to turn it back to Deanna.
Thank you. We're now going to move on to Q&A for members of the press. Because of limited time, only one representative from each media outlet is permitted to ask questions. Reporters are asked to limit their questions to 3 or fewer. Today, we're going to limit topics in the first round to questions related to the presentations, but if there's time for an additional round, we'll open them up to other topics. We also have Armando available for Spanish interpretation if it's needed. So we're going to get started with Anna Orso from the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Hi, everyone. This question is either for the commissioner or one of the deputy commissioners. I'm curious about the pinpoint grids. You've mentioned shootings going down in those areas, but there's a line on the slide that says that new pinpoints took effect in September 2020. So can you explain what that means and if you're comparing the same geographic locations or different locations?
Commissioner Dales, you want to go ahead and talk about the expansion and what that means?
Yeah, so as of September 28th of last year, we expanded our pinpoint grids to 45 from 7 to 45 citywide. So that's what that date represents when it went to effect when we expanded to 45 pinpoint grids.
So when you say that shootings are down 15% in those areas year over year, what is that? How are you deriving that figure?
So we're comparing that to those same exact zones last year with the same exact zones this year. So that's how we're able to compare those numbers based on the stats.
I see. So it's the same geographic locations, but they were not pinpoint grids last year. Got it. Okay, great. That's helpful. That's all for me. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Next, we have Saj Purple Blackwell.
Hi, guys. Good afternoon, everyone. So my first question is in regards to the shooting on Lehigh with the 2 15-year-olds. I know that Simon Gratz closed for 2 days so that the children could, kind of process all this and get counseling and things like that. What type of support is our police giving the high school in this situation, since 2 of those students, I believe, were from Simon Gratz?
Right. So we work with the schools. Chief Bethel, we communicate with him, and he pretty much makes sure the support groups are in place at the schools. So I'm sure that's in process as we speak.
Okay, thank you. But nothing that you actually know, because they actually closed already. So there's nothing that you know of right now.
Actually, Purple, this is Erica. We are reaching out because Mastery is a professor. We're developing a special relationship with them, and my office, my cluster, and a number of offices in my department are already in the process of setting up a meeting with them. We've been in communication with grads since before the school year started. We will continue that support and step in where needed and support them where needed, knowing that they're going through this crisis.
Okay, thank you very much. And for Councilman, if you're still online, question is, what type of process are people going to have to, normal average Philadelphia Joes going to have to get onto the advisory council that you have created? Is it a long process? Do you need some type of credentials? Do you know anything further?
Yeah, I think some of the criteria is that you are a Philadelphian and that you have not been an active police officer or in the union for the past 5 years. I hope that the selection panel will seek out individuals from various parts of the city. We don't want any one commissioner from the same police district. The other thing that I think we are shooting for is a diverse group of individuals with a range of life experiences so that we can create a fair process of evaluation of complaints.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, we are still talking about a downward scaling of the gun violence in the city of Philadelphia. And this is for one of the commissioners or the mayor, anyone who'd like to answer. What are we attributing that to? Is that part of the big bust that you had, Commissioner, the other day? Or is this directly because, again, there's any committee involvement that's actually affecting change? Or like, what is the downward tick being accredited to? Thank you.
I mean, I think it's probably all of the above. I mean, I don't think the bust the other day had necessarily a direct impact on the last week's numbers, unless Commissioner Dales or Outlaw, can say differently. I do think it's the awareness, it's the work in the communities, it's the folks on the ground who are trying to interact with these young people, and it's also trying to get people services and jobs, which I'm hoping. And we're not resting on our laurels. We don't think we think it's good that we see a trend, but we're not anywhere satisfied with where we are right now. We need to get this down much lower to 0 being the goal.
Right. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next, we have Kristen Johansson with KYW News.
Hi there. Question is first for Deputy Commissioner Nash. I think you said that there's somebody else or another suspect you guys are looking for the Maurizio case.
I'm sorry, Kristen, I didn't hear for which case you're referencing?
The Maurizio Gusmando, the 83-year-old that was beaten.
Yes, that's right. That terrible incident was committed by 2 offenders. We were able to obtain the DNA on one of the offenders, so that means there is a second person that's yet to be identified. There was video that was put out back in January on our YouTube channel. It was very blurry images. It wasn't great images, but we were just trying to publicize and make sure people were aware of that horrific incident. And perhaps with some additional attention, somebody else may have heard about another person that could have been involved. We very much want to identify the second individual. So that still exists.
Okay, there's no name though. I just want to make sure I didn't miss
No,
it.
I don't have a second person identified or a name. We're looking for, this is somewhere where we could really use help. And again, I'm going to emphasize there is a standing $20,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of all homicide suspects.
And my second question, I don't know if this is for you, the commissioner, whoever, but I've just noticed you're highlighting a number of cold cases today. You had the Fairmount Park rapist press conference the other day with new DNA. Is there maybe a push? I don't want to say push by the police, like you haven't done this, but is there kind of a renew because DNA is advancing? Is there a renew? I'm going to say push for lack of a better word.
Well, we talk about the importance of forensics all the time. And Director Garvey, when he has an opportunity to speak to council or to the public, the work that's being done by our forensics lab is incredible. It's critical, and it's an essential part of successful investigations. I specifically talked about these cases today, and 2 of them being solved by forensics because they came in recently. The case of Mr. Keel from a 2007 homicide, it's just not happening without that forensic edge and that ability. And the advancement in science. So we're always reliant and dependent upon our forensics. But right now, it just so happens that we had some significant cases that were recently brought in as a result of the forensics. And in light of the fact that next week is Forensics Week and a spotlight on the importance of forensics, it was a great opportunity to highlight those cases.
That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll do a call for a second round of questions since we have some time. Okay, seeing no further questions, that will conclude today's briefing. The next one will resume on Wednesday, September 29th. Take care.